All right. Well, hello. My name is Bradley Butler. I am the Executive Director and Curator at Main Street Arts in Clifton Springs, New York. It is currently 5 o'clock here, and if you can hear that siren, that's what that means here in Clifton Springs. Exhibition programming at Main Street Arts is made possible in part by the New York State Council on the Arts. And tonight you are tuned in to an artist talk for the exhibition Tangible Objects. This invitational group exhibition focuses on the material nature of objects and includes works in ceramic, fiber, metal, paper, mixed media, and oil paint with a focus on material and form. And like many exhibitions here at Main Street Arts, the idea for this show has evolved over time. My wife, Sarah, and I, she's also the co-director here at Main Street Arts, wanted to have a show that would highlight works that walk the line between traditional craft media and fine art. And so this show had many iterations in our discussions, but we ultimately landed on this exhibition. We each had several artists in mind, and when we brought them together, it made for a very unique viewing experience. So hopefully you've had the chance to come in and see the show for yourself, but if you haven't and you are in the area, the exhibition runs through this Thursday, July 14th, and it closes at 6 p.m. Hours tomorrow are 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and Thursday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. You can also see images of the show and a recording of the virtual walkthrough of the exhibition on our website, which is mainstreetartscs.org. So I am joined by 6 of the 7 artists tonight. Myung Urso couldn't make it here, but I will talk a little bit on her behalf. So I'm going to introduce each of the artists, and I'm going to stop the screen share. And we're going to start with Becca Baroli. So Becca, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, sure. Thanks for having me, Brad. I'm Becca Baroli. I'm a metal sculptor. I've been working with wire since a basic sculpture class that I took at the University of Connecticut, probably around 2010. After that, I went and got my MFA from the San Francisco Art Institute in 2016. And I've been just working with steel wire, using textile processes like weaving and latch hooking and kind of references to basketry. So definitely heavily involved in craft. And I think about a year ago, I moved back to Connecticut. So I'm kind of in the process of being more of a bi-coastal artist and sculptor and textile extraordinaire. So that's me. Thanks again for having me, Brad.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we'll hear more from Becca about her work just shortly here. So Sue Blumendale, if you'd like to introduce yourself next.
Hi. It's nice that you're all here. I'm glad to talk about my work. A little bit of background. I got my MFA a long time ago, 1980s. I was living in Vermont as an architectural draftsperson and was pretty bored and wanted to change. I had previously been an art teacher in Massachusetts. And so I took a course at Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in papermaking, and that changed my life. I had gone to Nazareth as undergrad, and so I always wanted to go to RIT, and I went that summer, I think it's 1981, and got into the program and immediately used some of my papermaking techniques. And I couldn't totally do papermaking. I also was printmaking. So, but it was throughout that experience that I realized there was an experience I had as a child of making forming structures over clotheslines that made me want to use paper like cloth. And so I've been doing that for 40 years. I made paper before, handmade paper. I spray painted it, I pinned it together. I made 6-foot pants, 10 pairs. Then I went into shirts, manufactured paper. but the handmade paper is exhausting. And so that's why I turned to manufactured paper. And the work you see in the show is manufactured handmade paper. But that was inspired, you know, by family history. My mother was passing, and I just felt a need to do that, and it was fun. You know, I could get to do clothing on a clothesline. and it sounds a little corny, but it was very, there was something in it that led me to stay with paper for my whole life. And I just used it in between teaching, you know, as my outlet. So, and that's kind of the basis of my using my medium, paper.
Great. Well, thank you, Sue.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And we'll hear again more from Sue about her work shortly. Next, we have Christina Brinkman.
Hi, I think I am unmuted now, so we're good to go. My name is Christina Brinkman. I've worked as an artist mostly my entire life. I have a degree from RIT, but it's for a double major in accounting and business administration. So all of my art for my whole life has been basically self-taught. I had a child who was handicapped at one time and was not able to go to work. So art became a very good outlet for me to be able to do things at home while I could still create and sell and do things like that. And that's how I actually ended up becoming an artist. I've worked as a painter, as a printmaker, for a very long time as a ceramicist, and only a couple years ago did my back start hurting me with lifting 50 pounds of clay around the studio all over. So I took a break from ceramics, and during COVID, I switched to silver because it was something that was easy to do and was lightweight and didn't require a lot of equipment, and kind of developed forms that I found were interesting, and but also you could use them. They were very functional. And that's basically it.
All right. Well, thank you, Christina.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave Dorsey.
Dave, you're
Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I was, let me start over. I was born in Illinois, grew up in Illinois and Idaho, and went to school here at the U of R. I took art courses throughout my life, but like Sue, I'm self-taught. I didn't get a degree. I studied at Munson Williams Proctor Institute, Memorial Art Gallery, and I had classes when I was in school, but I just opted to get a degree in literature, and basically I've made a living as a writer and a painter both over the past few decades. A lot of my instruction in painting has been by working with other painters, basically, just learning from them and watching what they do, and just in conversation. I have some great friends who are also painters. In the past 15 years, I've exhibited in galleries, museums, and universities around the country, and once in London. That's it.
Great. Well, thank you, Dave. And Peter Pincus.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Bradley. Thank you for having me. I am Peter Pincus. I am a Rochester native. I am actually from Pittsford, where in the late 90s, in high school, sort of found myself in a ceramics studio, and I've been working in clay ever since. I received my BFA and MFA from Alfred University, 2005 to 2011. I currently teach at the Rochester Institute of Technology with my colleague, Jane Schellenbarger. And I generally focus, we kind of teach all levels there, but I focus on mold making, complex and interesting mold systems. And that is usually over the last 10, 15 years, what I've been exhibiting: slip cast ceramics, very bright, ebullient vessels. This would be my first shift back away from that to wheel throwing again, which is where I got my start. I currently live and work with my wife and family in Penfield, New York.
Great. Thanks, Peter. And let's see, we have Anna Sprague next.
Hello, I'm Anna Sprague. Brad, thanks for having me. I've been working with metals and metal smithing since the 80s, the early 80s. And my BFA is from Kent State University. And my master's is in education. So I'm a full-time high school teacher in Penfield, New York, and awesome students where I teach jewelry and advanced jewelry and 3D design classes. In my spare time, I love enameling, and I work with making structures in metal with vitreous enamel. And during the lockdown, I experimented with found materials. So in the show, you'll see some work where I was working with ingredients from my kitchen cupboards. Yeah, that kind of reminded me of home when I was younger. So my work's inspired by nature. It's a big part of my life. That's it.
Great, thanks, Anna. And as I said, Myung couldn't make it tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit more about her work, or her and her work, as we get on into the talk here. So now we're going to go back through and have everyone talk a little bit about the work that's in the show, and I'm going to have some images up so everyone can see what you're talking about. And first, I just want to say also that this exhibition, I've been telling people that when they come in, it's one of my favorite, personally, one of my favorite kinds of exhibitions, because there's such a variety of work in this show, but it all seems to kind of go together. And that's always a big kind of curatorial challenge, to have a lot of things that seem like they might not go together in an exhibition and then make that work. And it's been a really great show. It's been well received. So thank you, all the artists, for being in the show, for making this work. And as I said, hopefully people can come in to see it the last couple of days here. So I'm just going to do a screen share, go back to our images here, and then we're going to come back around to, well, this is out of order. I'm not sure what's happening here, but so we're not going alphabetically. So Dave Dorsey, you are up first here. So if you want to talk a bit about the work that's in the show specifically, that'd be great.
Okay. Can you hear me? Did I unmute?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm working from, well, the interesting thing is what I didn't see the connection between my paintings and the other work in the show until I came and actually looked at the actual work and got a feel for, how tangible everything is in this show. And it kind of sort of opened my eyes to the fact that I'm doing something similar with taffy that say is being done here with lentils or metal or clay. I'm taking it and almost sculpting it with the wax paper. The paintings you have in the show are using the wax paper that comes with the candy. But sometimes I'll take that off and just cut a square of wax paper and then just keep working on it to get it. But I also take that piece of candy that arrives, and then I'll twist it and shape the like ears basically on each side of the candy. And so it's almost working. It's almost like working with modeling clay or something. And I'm creating this sort of three-dimensional version of what reminds me of like color field painting. Basically, you have these areas of color that are within the same format from painting to painting. And you have this structure that doesn't vary very much, but within that structure, there are all these little variations in the combination of color and the shapes, form, line, and that sort of thing. And I started off this way about 10 years ago with jars that I filled with jelly beans, gumballs, chiclets. One of the first things I ever showed at Manifest was a jar full of chiclets and breath mints. And it was the same thing where I would, fill the jar, just pick the colors I wanted, arrange it, and it's almost like a geometric abstraction. And basically that's what I'm doing. I use photorealistic techniques where I'll take photos. I use natural light and basically in the studio, pick a window and get the light I want. but I'll take dozens and dozens of photos just to try and get the right exposure and get the image that I want. I project it and I work from the projection, though I used to do it from life. And sometimes I worked with grids. And then, but I'm not working in a hyper realistic mode. When you get up close, you can tell that they're very painterly. I start off with areas of color to get the values right. And then I work some detail into it, but there's all kinds of detail I'm ignoring from the photographs. So it's basically almost traditional painting where, it's very much, the quality of the paint up close is what matters. And then you get a very realistic image from more of a distance. And that's it. That's my process.
And Dave, I was having trouble getting your paintings to show up.
Yeah, sure.
Something came out of order here, so I'm just gonna pull those up quick, and then people can see those. So
Okay.
hold one.
You got one there in the picture, so you kind of
Yeah.
not in the show.
All right, we may have to do a spoiler here. Sorry.
Well, there you go.
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, that's one I rewrapped. So those were two pieces of candy that came in the sort of wax paper that you see in the others where they have the logo, that's the squiggly red line. So I just unwrapped them, and then they also sat for a long time. Some of this candy's been sitting around for years, and so they just sagged, and it looks very punished, but it's in this wax paper that I cut into a square and then just rewrapped it. And so you get all these lines. So you see these like parallel lines and shapes. It's basically like abstraction. Essentially, it's like a three-dimensional abstraction. And those are the wax paper wraps that come with it. You can even see the little like copyright logo, trademark logo there in one over on the left-hand side.
Great, thank you, Dave. And let's see. Now again, I'm sorry about the spoilers here. We got to go back up to the top here. So I always get these right in order. Something happened, so I apologize to all. All right, here we are at the start of the alphabet as far as the show goes. Becca Baroli again. So so we got a studio shot for each artist and then a couple images of their work. So hopefully all right in order.
Yeah, that's my studio. There it is. It's
Big.
very messy right now. Like I said, I just moved here a year ago, and I had, I think, like 3 or 4 shows lined up before I moved. So you see like shipping crates and last minute things on the wall, like some work that I just got returned. I've also recently had a baby, so I've been a little bit out of the studio, more so than I would like, but that's why everything is still like just all over the place. But yeah, I moved into a pretty big space compared to where I was at in the East Bay of near Oakland, California. And so I'm working in this space, and you can see some of the work in the back, I guess. Some of the larger pieces that weren't in this show, but are very similar in technique. So there's a lot of latch hooking and basketry, weaving, and then just sort of some open weave processes that I sort of, I don't really want to say I developed over time, because it's kind of impossible to develop textile processes that don't already exist for centuries, but they're new to me processes. Building up vessels just using steel wire. You can see a few color pieces. I was anodizing aluminum for a while, which is similar to a natural dyeing process for fibers. So while that work's not in the show, it's I think I have some aluminum pieces, but there's no anodized pieces. But all of my work is very heavily influenced by textiles and the history of craft and fine art. Yeah, so this is actually the piece I wanted to talk about, Brad. It's called Better Half. I made this piece during the pandemic when I first had to, leave my job for a bit, doing antique rug restoration. So I had a lot of time at home, and I decided I was going to make this textile piece out of 400 of these pieces. I call them scribble pieces because they just look like little scribbles. but each piece is made up of over 5 feet of braided, I want to say like 18 gauge steel wire, something maybe, yeah, something around there, some thin gauge steel wire. So
18 is correct. Yeah.
okay, thanks, Fred. So like a lot of my work is kind of arbitrarily constrained by numbers because there's a lot of obsession and repetition in the work. And then to make it a bit more like practical in a way, I give it some arbitrary cutoff. So for this one, there were 400 pieces. They all had to be 5 feet long. And of course, like as the piece progressed, each scribble piece became closer to 7 feet long because I just, had to make sure it wasn't under 5 feet after, committing to so many already. So yeah, and then I just started kind of stitching these together with the wire. So the idea behind this piece is to approach it, depending on how the viewer approaches it, which half is the better half, right? Is it the very rigid, organized, orderly piece, or is it the one that looks torn and damaged, but is actually also more free and more organic? The shadows tend to be better on that side. So I think working with steel and this like hard and soft dichotomy alongside, like, is it textiles, is it sculpture, is it masculine, is it feminine, is it functional, is it dysfunctional? I'm questioning these judgments that people make, and I guess purpose and assumptions that people make about not just the materials, but people and us, and is how I kind of pull ideas from abstracted pieces. And I think it fits into the show because the questions people ask are always like, how long did it take to make? Like, let me see your hands, or like, can I touch it? So yeah, along with the obvious reference to craft and textiles, there's all the history of the hand of the artist with the time that's put into the piece. And yeah, this is the latest piece I've made. It's called On the Inside, and it's an 18 gauge steel vessel. It's pretty small, you'll see it in the show. But I wanted to do some really heavy layering with the wire. So from the outside, you can't really see that there's anything going on inside the piece. It'd be pretty easy to just dismiss this as like an empty vessel. And then if you were willing to give it the time and go see it up close, you'll see, all these variations in form and this layering and the little sphere in the center.
Great. Thanks, Becca.
Yeah, thank you.
And let's see, next we have Sue.
There, I unmuted. Looks great. This is my attic in my home. I just want to clarify a little bit. I did get my MFA from RIT, and I taught there for 20 years. Teaching drawing and paper making at times. I taught 2D design and all that stuff. But as of 2012, I've been teaching at MCC part-time, but I've been at MCC 34 years. So I go up in the studio, and you can see the mannequin there. The series that I did, Ancestral Personas, the clothing, is based on family history. My mother was passing, and I did a piece for her. I wanted to show her something. She really could care less, but that's okay. It didn't bother me. She didn't understand my work, so so anyway, the series grew, and I wanted to kind of get back to a whole piece, because I did a small piece for her. And I had in the past made a series of pants, 6-foot pants, all handmade paper. And then I made a series of shirts that weren't handmade paper, but manufactured paper. And so I had some relatives in my family that I never knew. For instance, my father's mother, and I only had 2 photographs of her, and I have 2 pieces in the show. that entail her image. So one is the coat, and she was very fashionable. I know she died when my father was 16. And so again, I didn't know that much about her. She liked butterflies. That was in another piece. But I loved working. Yeah, the second piece there is, it's Fanny. That was her name, Fanny with Friends. And there's a photograph that I did digitally through my inkjet computer. And then just stamped some butterflies on it. And the back has long ribbons or panels with some butterflies on it. But I just loved, I'm not a dressmaker, you know, I never did anything like this. My mother was a seamstress, and I remember I have a lot of memories of holding the fabric through the machine for her, you know, and when she was cutting the pattern on a desk, on a table. It was just kind of nice memories. And so I've just kind of continued that process. I won't do these again. I finished with Ancestors. And I mean, right now I'm doing some paper quilts, but to complete this, yes, this was on the invite, the announcement, and those were my aunts. And I have to show you a picture. I don't know if you guys can, I think you can see it, but this was, let's see, yeah. Okay, so that was an old photograph. My mother was the far one on the left, as you see her, but she had 4 sisters, and they were great. They just treated us a lot when we were children, and I don't know, I just needed to do this. And it's on archival paper, copy paper. When I was in Vermont, I did a lot of copy paper work, copy paper art. And anyway, so it's lasted for quite a while now. And those are 3 of my aunts that were in the picture here. The 4th one recently died of COVID. And so, but unfortunately I didn't have a picture of her at that age, so I didn't include her, but she'll appear sometime, whatever. So, I don't know, any other works there. The dress, the white dress was my mother's, this was my mother's, modeled after my mother's wedding slip that I have. And again, she had passed. And so I took Xeroxes of her jewelry and wedding rings, bracelets, religious medals, and they're between 2 layers of paper here. And so this is the only piece probably that could be worn. You know, in fact, a friend of mine did put it on and she did wear it, but it's not meant to be that because it's very fine paper and it's not as sturdy as cloth. And but I love that aspect. It's repairable. So, but that's kind of the history of that. I think I'm dealing with I know I'm dealing with suspension as a concept, movement and suspension. And I love walking in the gallery and just seeing the flowing, they're movable, you know, with the wind, and I like that. So thank you, Brad.
Great. Well, thank you, Sue. And let's see. And that brings us to Christina.
Hi, everyone. This is a close-up in my studio of some of the tools that I was using during COVID and making the silver work that I did. Most of it has to do with a spoon. A spoon has always been something that's been rather fascinating to me. It's sort of the first and last tool that you will ever use. And then a lot of these became design elements, taking a history of silver, old silver, which I sort of collect in my butler's pantry anyway. And I wanted to make a new version, something a little more free form, but something that still was functional and usable, and that you could actually use. And all of my work, no matter what the medium is, and I've worked in a lot of different mediums, but it tends to be rather spare and kind of minimal. And the spoons and items that I have here are also minimal. They're not lavish with design, or there are a few that have etching and carving in them. But I've made them out of flat metal and metal tubing, and it's a lot of cutting and drawing. I often start out with a little drawing or a sketch. Doesn't always end up that way, but in the end, then I will cut pieces, make a pattern, cut pieces, do some soldering, choosing whether they have very free form hanging rings. I love the fact that they can hang. And some of them are just round, perfectly round circles, and some are very free form hanging rings that you can hang things from and display them. There's a variety of sizes and shapes and uses for them. And it was something that really kept me busy during the months where we were all rather confined and couldn't go anywhere and stuff. So basically that's it. My studio is larger than you see on the picture, but I wanted to show some of those small tools that I would use, a flex shaft for polishing, and most of them are hand sawed. The cutting is all done by hand with a jeweler saw, and a small drill press. And you see some of these, I often add these little small details of tiny holes in them just as a design element, and often have favored handles, like on this particular spoon, with the minimal part in the at the beginning, and then it gets wider with a hanging ring at the end. So that's basically it. They're all, I also package them and keep them in silver cloth bags, which helps, to tarnish. Now they're made out of fine silver, which is 0.99 silver, 0.999 silver. And that tarnishes much slower rate than sterling silver. And I also like the color of it. It almost appears like a white metal, where if anyone knows my ceramic work, it is all white as well. So white is a color that I primarily work in, and the fine silver comes across as a white metal.
Great, thank you, Christina. And let's see, I think we're okay. Dave, we heard about these wonderful paintings. All right, brings us to Peter. Here's Peter's studio, or at least one part of it.
Yes, this is one part. I did send you a picture of a very dirty wheel, and you had maybe hidden that from sight, huh?
Yeah, I just had the one image for each person for the for this.
So this is a part of my studio. I have a studio in my basement and on the first floor of our house. And just if you were to walk toward those kilns and then look to the right, there would be this sort of a catastrophe of a space where I'm throwing some dark clay in an otherwise relatively clean mold making space. I have really since about 2016, well, actually, let's say since I started working at RIT about 9 years ago, I've been really just trying to figure out this balance between, what goes on in the classroom and what goes on in the studio. And at times they really seem to parody each other. And maybe at around 2016, this kind of tension emerged between what I was studying to teach and what I was studying to make. It all at that point started to revolve around 18th century ceramics, specifically looking at neoclassical vessels made by this gentleman, Josiah Wedgwood. And so, I would do a bunch of research, and that would lead to either an exhibition or a lecture or both, or a class. And it seemed like that tension I was both in the studio and out of the studio. Anyone who's taught can understand and feel this. and that there was a ledge, right? You can't live that way forever. And for me, it was 2020 when, when we had to go to virtual teaching, that this studio became just a resource really for teaching virtually and kind of trying to instruct and trying to do research. And so this would be the first real time that I've made anything for an exhibit since summer of 2020, other than cups that we would make for a sale. And so I kind of have not really been focusing on molds at all. And instead I'm turning to a very spare dark clay that is not so much focused on these sort of neoclassical conversation, not so much focused on some of the complexities that come with the mold making process. And instead, I guess for this, I'm playing off of this idea of tangible objects, finally trying to make some, because slip casting doesn't always make tangible objects. It tends to make things that are in reference to utility, but not necessarily strongly utilitarian. So one of the things that I've been interested in is the lidded jar, because there's a certain sort of mass you can get, and technically speaking, when you build a gallery on the wheel versus building a gallery in a mold making system. And so thinking about these, slightly larger objects that are lidded and that, contain something, but that really, there's this act of holding or grabbing or opening or closing. There's the handles there that imply some sort of lifting, whether one would or would not touch it. So in the show, there are a few of these lidded jars, and then there are a bunch of planters. And the planters, I'm really kind of excited about, because while I was really kind of establishing that slip casting work, I was also getting really interested in gardening. And I begged a bunch of my buddies that make pots professionally. I said, can you just make me a planter? And everyone said, absolutely not. And there was a bee in the bonnet of the ceramic artist when it came to planters, whereas I feel they should be, they sort of define utility. It is a vessel that is completely in service to another thing, 100%, right? It's like the most utilitarian object you could possibly make. And so it felt right to kind of explore them in my own studio as a way to kind of get going again and to think a little bit loosely about my own studio practice. So I have a series of small ones of those, and then one big one that I know doesn't abide by any of the rules of or standards of how a planter would function. And it would likely kill any Japanese maple you put in it. But there's this, again, exchange between the way the thing might work and the effect of its aesthetic. That's what I have, Bradley.
Thank you, Peter. And you have killed at least one plant in your pot, right?
Well, I hate to say it, but I'm looking out at one of my many Japanese maples that has died or is in the process of dying right now, but it is not in a planter. It is in the ground. So you can kill them in the ground too.
Right.
Though I do not recommend anyone killing them because it breaks a lot of hearts.
Thank you, Peter. All right, that brings us to Anna.
Okay, I had to unmute myself, sorry. Okay, my work for the last, I'd say, for the last like 3 years, and it started in lockdown. I've always been drawn to nature. Growing up in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, it was the burbs. And our backyard was all asphalt. So behind the garage was a length of woods, a wooded lot. Not really a lot, it was just like woodlands. That was the entire length of the street. So I spent my childhood in those woods, building forts, going on trails, whatever. I mean, every single day, especially in the summer. So I've always been drawn to woods and woodland, and then it emptied out into a meadow. So although I'm not like nature girl loving bugs, I absolutely feel some kind of sense of balance and peace when I'm in the woods and when I'm near nature and in nature. So My work, as much as possible, almost every day, I go out and I photograph. I photograph the nature, and I empty my mind and just kind of take in just what my surroundings are, so that when I get to the bench, when I get to the jeweler's bench, although I may have some sketches that come after the enamels, the initial painting in the enamels, they're based on memory and sense perceptions of things that happen while I'm walking through and noticing everything in nature. So details, very small things that somebody may overlook. In fact, a lot of times what I do notice doesn't happen for the first, the beginning of the trail or the beginning of hiking, because it's almost like your mind has to empty out and take out all of that fast-paced walking and what you've been doing from the morning or from the day before. So it's there's always something surprising. So those enamels that I build, that I make, they're done in China paint. It's a type of vitreous powdered enamel that's extraordinarily fine. It's mixed with oils, and it's painted in layers. So it can build up anywhere between like 5 and 15 layers, working into the surface. They're miniature paintings in glass. And then they're set in these pieces in sterling silver. And the pieces are then, they're made into 24 karat vermeil, which is 24 karat yellow gold plated onto silver. And the structures that house them have pinbacks on them. I also have made pieces that are worn in other places on the body. Some of the work that I make, it is a little larger than what fine jewelry would be. Some of the pieces are extraordinarily large to wear on the body. And some are just, you know, but they're not for everyday wear. My jewelry isn't production work. I don't make production work. Every piece is, has a theme to it. And the theme is often subtle or simple, but again, based on those memories and the experience of being outside and being outdoors in all seasons. So, you know, bundle up and out there when it's 15 degrees below zero and I'm at Lake Ontario shore and I'm walking up ice cliffs and photographing. So if you go to my Instagram page, you'll see photographs that I post from those hikes, and not everything can be photographed. Some of the experiences I can't share them with anyone, but I have them in my head, and those are the pieces that become the artwork. As far as tangible objects, Brad was very drawn to those pieces that are lentils and rice, and those pieces, although I was still outdoors and still working outside, I didn't have access to a kiln or to working in metal. So those found objects that had a comfort to me, those ingredients, the items that reminded me of like my grandmother and my childhood, they're placed in an acrylic medium. They are not flat on the bottom. They're almost like brooch sketches where they're curved underneath like a cabochon stone would be. And they're made with the actual, each grain of rice and each lentil being placed with tweezers and wearing an optivisor, a loop, so that I can see, and paying attention to and actually letting the materials kind of, how does each piece sit in relation to the other? And then once they're together, it's an unconscious way of working where I won't push it. I'll let it show me what is going to happen next. So these pieces are maybe about this big, and although these are brooch sketches, they're put under glass to preserve that quality of them that is very, you know, ephemeral. It will break down, and instead of building it up with other things. There's just another way of looking at small items in relation to each other.
Great. Well, thank you, Anna. And we just have, let's see. So as I said, Myung Urso couldn't make it for the talk today. This is a shot that I took when I was doing a studio visit with her. And all of this work is different from what we have in the show. And that was just something, I wanted to include this image because when I was there, it was like, I went there expecting I was going to see one thing or two kinds of things. And then I saw like 12 kinds of things. And it was awesome. So I wanted to make sure to share this. These are paper pulp pieces that she's done. But just a little bit about Myung. Myung was born in South Korea and received an MFA in fiber art at Hongik University in Seoul, Korea. And in 2006, she moved to the USA, settling in Rochester and became a contemporary jewelry artist. She creates unique, one-of-a-kind jewelry pieces using mainly fiber, paper, and mixed media with precious metals. And so we have two different examples of Myung's work. The first of which is on the screen now is collage work using paper pulp and hand-dyed fabric, and the other is jewelry. So this is part of a two-part series. The collage pieces and the jewelry, kind of both sides of the same coin. And it's the Arirang series, and it's both three-dimensional works and collage on cardboard have evolved from my native Korean culture as encapsulated in an ancient song called Arirang. The song's national and emotional rhythm reverberates within the series. I hand-dyed natural Rami fabric from South Korea and sculpted it into three-dimensional objects. Using simple sewing techniques, these collage works are derived from the observation of leftover cutting of Rami fabric. The color palette I use also reflects the colors of my native culture based on its costumes and architecture. So once you realize that the collage works are based on, these scraps, you really can kind of see that. But it's really interesting the way that these little scraps get transformed into something altogether. So I really love the way that these two parts of one body of work relate to one another. And there are a couple instances in the exhibition where we installed the necklace right below the collage on the wall. It just gives you that impression how directly related they are. And also it makes me think about, so Sarah and I used to make handmade books, and we would do little collages on the covers sometimes. And it's like, whenever you do a collage, you can never get rid of those little pieces. They're just like, no matter how small they get, until you can't like handle them without crushing them, then you get rid of them, but otherwise you keep them. So the way that Myung uses the scraps to make the collage works, it just made me think of that. And so I really, really appreciated that. But all of the jewelry work has like a wire armature. So you can see in the image here, this necklace, these are all hollow forms that have a wire kind of core, and then they're hand stitched with the hand dyed fabric. And there's a lot of interesting subtleties here. Different sides are connecting to each other in the necklace. So it's not an even symmetrical thing. It's very kind of undulating and organic. So I really appreciated that about Myung's work. And also in the collage pieces, she's using like a paperboard, which, comes off the wall in different ways. And then that texture that blue is actually a paper pulp that's dyed and then coating the surface, and then it's drawn on top of and then collaged. So really, really interesting, and excited to have it in the show. And that brings us to the end of tonight's talk. And so I'll just bring everyone's faces back here, and just like to thank everyone for joining us tonight and for listening to all these great artists talk. And thank you again to all of you for being in the show. Really great to have you in a show together. Yeah, so if you can come out to see the exhibition, again, it runs through Thursday at 6 p.m. So we're open tomorrow from 11 a.m. or yeah, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then Thursday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you're not able to see the show, please visit our website, mainstreetartscs.org, and you can see images of the show along with a virtual walkthrough. So thank you and good night.